You ever have one of those moments where your whole life shifts in a single breath? For me, it was a Tuesday. Cold as hell, sun blazing like it had something to prove. And I was sitting in a law office that smelled like old leather and new disappointment. The place? Hutchinson and Gray LLP. Fancy name, fancier furniture. I was curled into one of those stiff chairs in the corner, watching my older sister strut around like she already owned the world, which, knowing my parents, she probably did. Miss Lila Grant, the lawyer called, breaking into my thoughts. I looked up, heart thudding in my chest. I was 31, job hopping, apartment renting, emotionally exhausted and about to find out what my parents had really thought of me. Mr. Hutchinson adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and began reading the will. To our beloved daughter Ava, for her commitment to upholding the Grant family vision and tirelessly managing the company. He went on, and on, and on. The estate in Aspen, the lake house, 60% of Grant Tech, a vault of investment accounts that made me dizzy just hearing the numbers. Ava sat there with this smug little tilt of her mouth, like she'd already rehearsed this moment in front of the mirror. Then, my turn, to our younger daughter, Lila. A pause. Papers shuffled. I braced myself. We leave the painting Winter Dusk currently displayed in the main hall. I blinked. I'm sorry. A painting? It was your mother's favorite, the lawyer said quickly, as if that would make it better. Ava's laugh echoed through the room. Not even a polite one more like a bark. A painting, she said, looking over at me like I was the family pet who just got a tennis ball instead of a treat. Well, I suppose you can hang it in your studio apartment. I stood up before I said something I'd regret. I wasn't surprised. I was used to being the other daughter, the one who didn't want to work at Grant Tech, who chose to study art restoration instead of finance, the one who failed to live up to their legacy. Still, the sheer coldness of it hit hard. I left without another word. By the time I pulled up to my parents', now Ava's house, dusk was settling. The estate looked different, colder somehow. The guards let me in after I explained, though their faces were tight and watchful. Inside, Marta, our longtime housekeeper, met me at the door with watery eyes. "Miss Lila," she said, pulling me into a hug. "They did you dirty." I squeezed her hand. "I just need the painting." She helped me unmount it from the wall where it had always hung, wrapped it carefully in an old cashmere blanket. "Your mom used to stare at this thing for hours," she said, brushing the frame with her thumb. Toward the end, she'd whisper strange things. Numbers, patterns. We thought it was the illness. I frowned, turning the painting over in my hands. A snowy forest, soft strokes of lavender and gray, and beneath it, something odd. Shapes, very faint geometric patterns woven into the branches and shadows. That night, back at my apartment, I hung the painting above the couch. I poured a glass of wine, curled up under a blanket, and just stared. The painting wasn't just beautiful. It was precise, almost surgical. Every brushstroke seemed intentional, like it was trying to say something. The shapes I couldn't unsee them now felt deliberate, like a code. I pulled out my laptop, typed in the artist's name, Celeste Whitaker. Barely anything online. No major exhibits, no records. The gallery mom bought the painting from, gone, which made 0 sense. My mom had taste, but she wasn't the type to buy unknown art. Unless it wasn't about the artist. A text buzzed in from Ava. "Don't be dramatic. You were never into the business anyway. Be happy with the art." I ignored her. She never understood me, and frankly, never tried. I leaned in closer to the painting. The colors of the shapes weren't quite the same as the rest of the canvas. Slightly muted, hidden but not entirely, almost like steganography. I hadn't thought about that word in years. I'd studied it in college, hiding data inside visual art. It was niche, weirdly specific. Was that what this was? Just then, a knock at the door made me jump. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, I saw Ava. Perfect Ava. Except, she didn't look perfect. Hair messy, eyes wild. "Lila," she hissed through the door. "Open up, we need to talk." I stayed silent. "Lila, it's about the painting. You don't understand what you have." A chill crawled down my spine. "You laughed at it," I said through the door. "Now you want it? I'll give you $3 million, she said quickly. "Right now. Just give it to me." I stared at the door like it might morph into a portal to Narnia. What the hell was going on? "You have 5 seconds to leave before I call the cops," I said, backing away. Then I heard it. Keys. She still had a spare key from years ago. I grabbed the painting off the wall, bolted into my bedroom, and locked the door just as I heard the front door creak open. "Lila," she shouted. "Don't be stupid." That painting, I wasn't listening. I turned on every light in the room and laid the painting on my bed. That's when I saw it. Hidden in the lower right corner, blended into the snow-draped ground. Numbers. Not just numbers, coordinates. I flipped the frame over and noticed a small bulge behind the canvas. My hands shook as I pried it open. Inside was a folded piece of paper, in my mom's handwriting. To my daughter Lila, "If you're reading this, it means you saw what others never did. You see the truth hiding in plain sight. And now, you're ready to learn why your father and sister feared you more than they'd ever admit." My door handle rattled, but all I could do was stare at the letter in my hands. I barely heard Ava pounding on the other side of my bedroom door. My heart was thudding too loud in my ears, and my mother's letter sat heavy in my lap. "They fear you because you think differently. You were never meant to follow their path. You were meant to expose it." Her handwriting was still so neat. Sharp loops, precise angles like she never lost control, even when everything else was slipping away. I read on. "The numbers in the painting are coordinates, but that's just step 1. Use the sequence hidden in the trees. Overlay it with the grid I've drawn on the back of this letter. What you'll find is the truth." I flipped the letter over and, sure enough, a faint pencil sketch was pressed into the paper lines, forming a strange, irregular grid. My art restoration brain kicked in. It was like deciphering a broken fresco. My fingers traced the numbers again on the painting, now spread across my bed. The forest wasn't just a scene. It was a blueprint, a key. Ava's voice finally broke through the fog. "Lila, listen to me. That painting, it's not safe. Mom left behind things that people would kill for." My blood turned to ice. "And you think I'll just hand it over?" I called back. "Because you suddenly care now?" "I didn't know," she said, her voice almost cracking. "None of us did. Until last year." I didn't respond. What kind of family hides secrets in oil paintings? What kind of mother leaves her youngest daughter a treasure map disguised as abstract art? And what exactly had they all been covering up? I shoved the letter and painting into my duffel bag, grabbed my keys, and climbed out the bedroom window. My building wasn't exactly a fortress I knew Ava could bust in eventually. I didn't plan to be there when she did. I drove all night. I had no destination yet, just the coordinates scribbled on the back of the letter. According to GPS, they pointed somewhere out near the Adirondacks, isolated, remote, basically in the middle of nowhere. Perfect. About 2 hours into the drive, I pulled into a 24-hour diner. My hands were still shaking, so I ordered pancakes just to have something to focus on. I spread the painting out in the booth, shielding it from curious eyes with my jacket. The waitress gave me a weird look, but didn't ask questions. Bless her. I followed my mom's instructions, lining up the sequence of numbers hidden in the branches with the grid on the back of the letter. They formed a new pattern coordinates, sure, but now they had symbols next to them, like labels. Storage, lab, access point. That's when it hit me. She hadn't just painted a scene. She painted an entire system, and she'd hidden the access codes in plain sight. My mom had been more than an artist, more than a board member's wife, more than the woman everyone dismissed when she got sick. She'd been running her own silent rebellion right under everyone's noses. I didn't even finish the pancakes. I paid, left a big tip, and hit the road again. By the time I reached the location, the sun was rising. There was nothing out there but trees, old farmland, and a crumbling barn that looked like it hadn't been touched since dial-up internet was a thing. I stepped out of the car, and the cold bit into my skin. It was eerily quiet, like the land was holding its breath. The barn door groaned when I pushed it open. Dust swirled. The floorboards creaked under my boots. At first glance, it looked empty, but as I moved toward the far corner, I noticed something strange boards on the floor that were newer than the rest, and beneath them, a faint metallic clink. I dropped to my knees and pulled the boards loose. Underneath, a metal hatch with a keypad. My heart nearly stopped. I took out the letter and entered the first number sequence from the painting. The hatch clicked open. I climbed down into darkness. The air changed immediately cool, dry, artificial. Motion lights flickered to life as I descended a narrow metal staircase. And then, at the bottom, a door. When I opened it, I swear I forgot how to breathe. It was a lab. A real, high-tech, cold as steel laboratory. Shelves of documents, blueprints, dots, computers humming in sleep mode. Tools, prototypes. Everything was pristine, preserved. And right there on the back wall, a framed schematic, Grant Tech Neural Interface, VO1, inventor, Dr. Eleanor Lynn. My knees buckled and I had to sit on the floor staring at it. They told the world she was just a contributor, a helper, a supportive wife. But she had designed the tech that put Grant Tech on the map, and they buried her name. I moved from file to file, more pieces clicking into place. Patent filings with her signature, early AI modules, notes written in her voice. They stole everything. Every piece of tech my father had bragged about. Every award Ava accepted on behalf of the family. All of it was built on my mother's genius, and they never gave her credit. Suddenly, I heard something upstairs. Footsteps. I froze. They were slow, deliberate. Someone was coming down the stairs. I darted back to the wall, flipped off the lights, and pulled out my phone. The tiny red recording light blinked as I crouched behind a server rack. The door creaked open. Then I heard it. "I told you she'd come here eventually." My father's voice. I stopped breathing. He was supposed to be dead. He died 3 years ago in a car crash, a closed casket funeral, flowers, eulogies. I peeked through the server racks and saw him, very much alive, standing beside Ava. "What do we do with her?" Ava asked quietly. "She's seen too much," he said. "We burn the place, everything, tonight." He moved toward the workstation where I'd just been sitting, but I was already backing away, eyes fixed on the emergency exit at the far end of the lab. My mother had mentioned it briefly in the letter, barely a line, but I remembered, in case of discovery, use the auxiliary path. I ran for it, slipped through the narrow door and bolted up the tunnel, barely stopping to breathe until I emerged in the woods, maybe half a mile from the barn. My car was still parked out front, but theirs was there now, too, a sleek, black SUV. I couldn't go back. Not yet. But I had something they didn't, the painting, the codes, the original files I'd already photographed. I just needed time, and maybe a plan. I didn't drive home. I couldn't. Not with Ava and my very much alive father lurking around like villains in a spy thriller. I ended up parked in the back lot of a 24-hour gym, engine off, slouched in the front seat like a fugitive. I hadn't slept in nearly 36 hours, but adrenaline kept me sharp. They were going to burn the lab, wipe it all clean, erase her again, but they didn't know what I had already copied. Dozens of photos, blueprints, access logs, all stored on a cloud drive with backups on 2 flash drives. I duct taped to the inside of my boot. Yeah, I went full mission, impossible with it. Blame the paranoia. I stared at the painting laid across the passenger seat. Winter dusk. It had been part of my childhood. I used to walk past it on the staircase every day without a second thought. And now it was the map to everything. My mother must have known they'd come for it eventually. That's why she left it to me, because I'd be the one person who'd actually look deeper. Everyone else saw trees and shadows. I saw warnings. I finally crashed at a cheap roadside motel with buzzing lights and a front desk clerk who didn't even look up from his phone. Worked for me. I shoved a chair under the door handle and passed out for a few hours. But the dream that came wasn't rest. It was her, my mom. She was standing in the lab, facing away from me, looking up at the patents on the wall. Then she turned, held out the painting, and whispered, "They can't bury the truth if you make it loud." I woke up with a gasp, heart hammering. It was time. I wasn't built for revenge, not the calculated, dramatic kind anyway, but I knew how to tell a story. I knew how to shine a spotlight. And most of all, I knew how to make people listen when the truth was ugly. So I made a plan. Step 1, send the files to someone who mattered. I started with a former investigative journalist I followed on Twitter. The guy specialized in corporate fraud. And I remembered he'd once gotten an entire hedge fund CEO indicted off one blurry spreadsheet. I emailed him everything I had, no name, no explanation. Just a subject line, "You'll want to see this. Tech empire, built on stolen genius. Step 2, smoke out the snakes." I texted Ava one sentence, "We're not done. You missed the second lab." Within 10 minutes, she called me. I didn't answer. 5 minutes later, another call. Then another from a number I didn't recognize. Blocked both. I wasn't bluffing, by the way. The second lab didn't exist, not yet. But I had enough files and enough breadcrumbs to make them think there might be more. Let them spiral. Let them burn their own house down chasing ghosts. Step 3. Go back to where it started. I drove straight to Marta's house. She was the only person left I trusted. She answered the door in her robe and slippers, eyes widening when she saw me holding the wrapped painting. "Oh, honey," she whispered, pulling me inside. "What have they done now?" "Everything," I said, setting the painting down on her kitchen table. "And it's only going to get worse." I told her everything. The lab, the files, my father's return from the grave, the way Ava's voice had trembled on the phone, the way I could practically hear the walls closing in on them. She listened, the way she always had no interruptions, just quiet nods and the occasional soft hand squeeze. When I finished, she stood and walked to a cupboard I'd seen her open 100 times when we were kids. She pulled out a manila envelope. "Your mom gave me this," she said. Said it was for when the real storm came. I opened it slowly. Inside, bank records, offshore accounts, receipts. But more than that, a list of names. Inventors, scientists, artists, all people who had worked with my parents over the years. All people whose ideas had ended up under Grant Tech's patents. And beside each name, the word stolen. My mom hadn't just kept a lab. She'd kept a ledger. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a block number. And against my better judgment, I answered. "Lila." My father's voice. I didn't say anything. "You're making a mistake," he said. "You think this is about truth and legacy. It's not. It's about survival. The world doesn't reward the honest. It rewards the ruthless." "Then maybe it's time the world changes," I said quietly. He chuckled. "That idealism is exactly why your mother failed." "She didn't fail," I snapped. "You buried her brilliance because it scared you." Silence. Then, "You'll regret this." And he hung up. But I didn't feel fear. I felt clarity. He thought this was a battle of logic, business, control. But it wasn't. This was war. Personal, emotional, and long overdue. That night, I did something I never thought I'd do. I uploaded everything. Every file, every photo, the video of the lab, the patents, the ledger. I dumped it all onto a website I built in under an hour and sent the link to every major tech blog, news outlet, and ethics watchdog I could think of. Then I posted it publicly with one caption. "My family stole genius and called it legacy. Time to set the record straight." I expected pushback. I expected lawsuits. What I didn't expect was how fast it caught fire. Within hours, it was trending. Hashtag Grant Tech scandal, hashtag Eleanor was the genius, hashtag patent thief. Emails flooded in. Journalists or employees. Anonymous whistleblowers. People who had always suspected something was off. Even shareholders. One email stood out. It was from a former engineer at Grant Tech. He'd been fired 10 years ago under mysterious circumstances. His message was simple. I always knew it was her. "I'm with you. Tell me how to help." 2 days later, Grant Tech stock plummeted. Ava went dark on social media. Their PR team was in full meltdown. Every major outlet was demanding answers. And I hadn't even dropped the final hammer yet. I returned to the lab, not the original one they tried to burn too risky, but a different location my mom had mentioned in passing. One tied to a storage unit she'd kept under her maiden name. Inside, I found the motherlode. Recordings, voice memos, design logs, even a few video diaries my mom, sitting in her lab, explaining her vision, her fears, her plan. If you're watching this, it means they found a way to silence me. But if my daughter found you, then maybe truth still has a chance. I uploaded the video without editing a single word. It went viral within hours. Now they couldn't bury it even if they wanted to. The day my mom's video hit the front page of every major tech outlet, I stopped being invisible. Strangers were DMing me things like, "Your mom was a genius," and I always wondered why her name disappeared. But what shook me most were the messages from people who knew. Former engineers, quiet collaborators, folks who'd worked on the fringes of Grant Tech before suddenly being cut out of projects or out of the company altogether. Their stories matched up like puzzle pieces, designs reassigned, credit mysteriously shifted to executive names, NDAs forced down throats. One woman messaged me saying, "I helped build the first neural calibration prototype in 2004. Your father told me it wasn't too ambitious, then launched it 2 years later with his name on it. They didn't just steal from my mom, they'd stolen from dozens. My inbox became a confession box, and I didn't stop them. Because for the first time in my life, I had something stronger than silence on my side. I had truth. But truth is a funny thing. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it creeps. Sometimes it walks in slow, careful steps before kicking your door down. And sometimes it shows up in the form of a court summons. Yep. 3 days after I released the footage, I got hit with a cease and desist from Grant Tech's legal team. Apparently, they didn't appreciate my little expose and were accusing me of unauthorized access to proprietary assets. I laughed out loud because I knew the signatures on those patents weren't theirs to begin with, and I had receipts, literally. Still, I wasn't stupid. I forwarded the notice to a contact I'd made a lawyer from a tech whistleblower nonprofit who'd reached out the moment the news broke. Her name was Zara, brilliant, sharp, and colder than January in Chicago when she was in court mode. She called me an hour after I sent the email. "Lila," she said, "tell them to come at you. We're ready." And we were, because while they'd been busy crafting their legacy, my mom had been building a fail-safe, a folder labeled for Lila, tucked deep in that second lab I'd discovered. Inside, a full chain of digital evidence, timestamps, security logs, server backups showing when files were created, when they were altered, and most importantly, who did the altering. Every manipulation, every theft. She'd tracked it all, and she'd waited, like she knew one day I'd be the one to bring it into the light. I wasn't just her daughter, I was her contingency plan. Meanwhile, Ava was falling apart in real time. First, a shaky press conference with a PR team that looked like they were holding her hostage. Then a corporate email leak, showing board members panicking about potential fiduciary breaches and legacy destabilization. Translation, investors were freaking out. And just when I thought things couldn't spiral faster, someone leaked the internal memo where Grant Tech's board admitted they'd known about my mother's work and had chosen to suppress it for optics. It was over, not all at once, but in layers. Quiet collapses, sudden resignations, investigations, frozen accounts. The empire cracked one truth at a time, and all I did was keep the camera rolling. But here's the thing about exposing darkness. Eventually, it turns its eyes on you. I started getting followed. First, I noticed the same black SUV parked outside my motel 3 nights in a row. Then someone rifled through my car while I was inside a gas station. They didn't even take anything, just left the glove box open like a warning. The night after that, someone knocked on my door at 3 a.m. and said nothing when I asked who it was. That kind of silence, it sticks in your bones. I told Zara. She insisted I stay with someone. Anywhere that had cameras, neighbors, walls, thicker than cardboard. I called Marta. "Of course, honey," she said. "You should have come sooner." She didn't hesitate, didn't ask questions. And suddenly I was sleeping on her couch. The painting leaned against her bookshelf, my flash drives hidden in a tea tin above the fridge. Sometimes, safety is the warmth of a familiar kitchen and the smell of someone else making breakfast while you watch the world implode. A week passed. Then, too, Grant Tech's interim CEO made a public statement acknowledging historical oversights and restructuring in light of recent revelations. Translation, damage control. Meanwhile, Ava, she finally called me again, and this time I picked up. Her voice was raw, no arrogance, no smirk behind the words. "Dad's gone off the rails," she said. "He's planning to disappear. Offshore accounts, fake IDs, the whole thing." I didn't say anything, she continued. "I didn't know about everything, Lila. Not at first. I swear to God. But I still helped cover it up." Silence again. I want to fix something. Anything. Can we meet?" I should have said no. Every logical bone in my body screamed trap. But part of me wanted to look her in the eyes. Not for closure. Not for forgiveness. Just to see if she meant it. We met at a park we used to play in as kids. Neutral ground. She looked thinner. Exhausted. Like the mask she wore her whole life had finally cracked. "Mom loved you, you know," she said as we sat on the bench. I was jealous of that. I raised an eyebrow. "She left you everything." She shook her head. She left me responsibility. You? She left you truth. That landed like a punch, and I didn't know what to say. Then she pulled out a USB drive. This is everything Dad planned. Names, accounts, where he's going. You can stop him before he runs. I didn't ask why she was helping. Maybe guilt finally caught up to her. Maybe she just didn't want to drown alone. I took it. And for the first time in years, we sat quietly. No lawyers or legacy between us, just two sisters who'd lived in different versions of the same house. Back at Marta's, I gave the drive to Zara. She smiled, sharp and dangerous. This is enough to indict a whole boardroom, she said. And your father? He won't even make it to the airport. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reckoning. I didn't want to ruin them. I just wanted the truth to count. For every inventor silenced. For every name erased. For every time my mom had to swallow her brilliance in a room full of men who took credit for her spark. I wanted that to mean something. The morning after Ava handed me that USB drive, the sky broke open with rain. It felt fitting. Like the world knew something was about to end. Zara called me around 8 a.m., voice crackling through the speaker like electricity. We got him, she said, barely suppressing a grin. Feds intercepted your father on the way to a private airstrip. Fake passport in his sock. 6 burner phones. You name it. I didn't respond right away. I just stared out Marta's window at the rain carving lines through the glass. So that was it. After everything, my father was finally facing consequences. Not just for the theft, or the fraud, or the false patents, but for erasing my mom. Ava texted me not long after, I heard. I didn't think it'd actually happen. Thank you. I didn't answer. Not out of spite, I just didn't know what to say. Guilt and redemption don't cancel each other out. They just sit beside each other, uneasy and unfinished. That afternoon, I went back to the lab. Not to hide anything, not to run, but to say goodbye. The feds had already swept through, tagged everything, photographed it all. But the painting was still safe, wrapped and leaning against a console, waiting. I unwrapped it slowly. My fingers brushed the canvas, and for a second, it felt like my mom was there beside me again, quiet, observant, waiting for me to see what others missed. Even now, I kept finding new layers, new codes, shapes. It never stopped speaking. I walked the perimeter of the lab one last time, letting my steps echo off the walls. It wasn't cold anymore, not to me. It felt like legacy. Not the fake kind Grant Tech had peddled for decades, the real kind. The kind you build from sacrifice, from vision, from truth. I left the lab carrying only what mattered. The painting, the original letter, and my mother's old notebook filled with sketches no one had ever published. Yet, that week, the story kept spreading. News anchors called it the biggest corporate reckoning in tech since Enron. Reddit was on fire. GrantGate, hashtag she was the genius, hashtag Winter Dusk decoded. Someone even made a subreddit dedicated to deciphering hidden symbols in the painting. People were finding stuff I hadn't even noticed yet. Entire grids, layered under snowdrifts, coordinates buried in shadow lines. It became a movement. And I guess that was the point, right? My mom hadn't left the painting to me just so I could learn a secret. She left it because she believed I'd do something with it. She'd always known I wasn't like Ava, or Dad, or anyone else in the family business. I wasn't there to keep the system going. I was there to break it open. Grant Tech collapsed in stages. First the headlines, then the lawsuits, then the boardroom purges. The company didn't die exactly, it molted, peeled back its old skin and tried to regrow something new. They called me, offered me a seat at the table. To help guide the transition, they said. At first I laughed, but Zara was the one who made me think twice. Lila, she said, folding her arms in that way that meant she wasn't just giving advice, she was warning me. You don't have to accept power, but you should understand it. Because if you don't shape what happens next, someone else will. So I didn't join the board. I replaced it. Technically, the patents now belong to me through the trust my mom created years ago. She'd filed them under an alias ELN, hidden in plain sight. And now that they were legally restored to her name, the royalties flowed through the estate, which meant I controlled the tech that Grant Tech was built on. And the moment they realized it, they begged me to talk. So I did, not as a CEO, not as a daughter of the empire, but as the woman whose mother had built it all from scratch and been buried for it. I met with the board in the same conference room where they'd once laughed off concerns about whistleblowers. I didn't scream, I didn't threaten. I just opened my laptop and clicked play. The video was one of my mom's last. In it, she stared straight into the camera. No makeup, no filters. Just her, soft-spoken and clear-eyed. If you're watching this, then Lila did it. She brought the truth out. And to the people sitting across from her, I hope you feel it. The weight of what you took. The brilliance you tried to silence. I gave you my mind, my years, my vision, and you gave me obscurity. You could hear a pin drop in the room. I closed the laptop. Then I slid over the documents. The company's yours to fix, I said. But these are the terms. A full public apology. Restitution to every inventor whose work was stolen. A restructuring of the entire company model, transparency, ethics reviews, open innovation forums, and the rebranding of Grant Tech to something new, because some names don't deserve to survive. We called it Aurora, my mom's favorite word, a promise of light after darkness. A month later, I stood in front of a packed auditorium announcing the transition. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward. But I wasn't nervous. I felt solid, centered. This company was built on brilliance, I said. But that brilliance was buried under lies. Today we begin something better, not perfect, not polished, but honest. Aurora will be a space where ideas matter more than titles, where names aren't stolen, and where genius is nurtured, not consumed. The crowd stood. I didn't expect them to, but maybe they weren't clapping for me. Maybe they were clapping for her. Ava stood beside me backstage. We weren't exactly sisters again. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But we were. Something. She reached into her coat pocket and handed me a tiny velvet box. I found this in Dad's desk before they arrested him, she said. I think it was Mom's. I opened it. Inside was a silver necklace. A small pendant shaped like a snowflake, but if you looked closer, it was a compass. Tiny coordinates etched into the metal. Another map. Another message. I think she left more, Ava said. More than we know. I nodded, throat tight. I think she left everything, I whispered. That night, I returned to Marta's. I hung the painting above her fireplace. It didn't feel like an artifact anymore. It felt like home. The lines, the shapes, they weren't just secrets. They were proof. Proof that buried voices can still rise. That stolen names can still be reclaimed. And that sometimes, justice doesn't arrive in a courtroom or a headline. Sometimes, it arrives in the quiet space where the truth is finally safe enough to speak. 2 years later, and the world looks different. Not just because the building downtown that used to say Grant Tech now reads Aurora Innovations in silver letters. Not just because my mother's name is finally in textbooks, museum catalogs, even award ceremonies she never lived to attend. It's different because the silence is gone, replaced by voices, stories, names restored to inventions, inventors finally seen. I never imagined I'd be at the center of all this. I was the artsy daughter, the one who didn't follow the family blueprint, the one who got a painting instead of a legacy. But that painting turned out to be the blueprint. A whole damn revolution, hidden in oil and canvas. Funny how things work. Every year now, Aurora hosts an innovation fair. We invite underrepresented creators, women, people of color, first-gen engineers, inventors from rural communities, people whose voices were often ignored, just like hers was. We don't hand out trophies. We hand out funding, mentorship, protection. Last year, a 17-year-old girl from New Mexico presented a solar fiber mesh that could insulate homes for under $100. My mom would have lost her mind over it. I gave her the first ever Eleanor Lynn Grant Fellowship. The kid didn't cry, but I did, quietly, in the green room, watching her hug her grandmother and smile like the world had just cracked open wide enough to let her dream breathe. I carry the painting with me to every event, not to show off, but to remember what brilliance looks like when it's disguised as silence, what truth feels like when it finally breathes. Sometimes, I still find shapes I hadn't noticed before. Sometimes, I swear they move. Ava works with us now. Not in the spotlight, she didn't want that, and honestly, I think it's better this way. She manages Aurora's ethics and compliance department. The irony isn't lost on either of us. She says it's her way of paying back a debt, one day at a time. We're not exactly close, but we're real with each other now. That's something. She apologized again last fall, unprompted, over coffee. It wasn't dramatic, just honest. I was wrong. she said. About Mom, about you, about everything. I believed her. But belief doesn't erase history. It just stops it from repeating. My father pled guilty. The trial was short. The evidence spoke louder than he ever did. They sentenced him to 15 years. He didn't look at me once in the courtroom, but I looked at him, not out of spite, not even out of closure, just curiosity. The man who built an empire out of stolen brilliance had nothing left but a gray suit and a last name that no longer meant anything. After the sentencing, I visited his lawyer's office, not to confront, not to gloat, just to collect one last item, my mom's journal, the one he'd kept locked away in his study for years, claiming it was company material. Inside, I found notes she'd written during the final months of her life. They weren't blueprints. They weren't coordinates. They were letters. To me, dozens of them. Some were just short thoughts. Lila will understand the shapes. She always saw the layers. Others were stories from her childhood, hopes for the future, memories of us painting together in the sunroom when I was 6. But one entry stopped me cold. They've built walls around my work, but I raised a daughter who knows how to break walls without burning herself. She'll survive this. She'll see it through. I read that line 10 times, maybe 20. Sometimes at night, when I can't sleep, I walk through the Aurora campus. It's quiet, peaceful. The air smells like fresh circuit boards and hope. In the main lobby, we have a display now, patents, designs, and a copy of the original painting. The real one stays with me, but we made a replica so others could study it, decode it, appreciate it for what it really was. A monument to brilliance no one could erase. There's a plaque underneath it now that reads, "She saw what others missed." And because she did, we all see more clearly now. I didn't write that. Zara did. I cried when I saw it. Last month, I got an email from the Smithsonian. They want to feature my mother's work in a permanent exhibit. Not just her patents, the painting, the story, the revolution. I said yes on one condition. The exhibit has to include the names of every other person my father's company ever erased. Every inventor, researcher, assistant, and artist who got buried beneath the Grantech machine. They agreed. Because now, we don't erase, we restore. And as for me, I still live in a modest apartment, still drink too much coffee, still keep my boots near the door in case I ever have to run again. But I don't hide anymore. I speak at panels, mentor creators, write essays, and sometimes I sit in my living room late at night, the real painting still hanging above the mantle, and I talk to her, out loud. I tell her how the latest project's going. I tell her what inventions came in this week's grant applications. I tell her I'm proud, not just of her but of myself too, because I finally get it. The inheritance wasn't the painting. It wasn't the patents or the lab or the keys to a company. It was the courage to see what no one else saw, and the strength to bring it into the light. There's one more letter I haven't opened, the very last one she wrote. Marta gave it to me recently, saying it was supposed to be handed over when things were finally safe. It sits in a drawer in my office. I'm not ready yet. Not because I'm scared of what's inside, but because part of me likes knowing there's still one more thing to discover, one more whisper from her waiting. Maybe I'll open it next year. Maybe I'll open it tomorrow. But for now, I keep building. For the misfits, for the erased, for the kids who see patterns no one else does. And every time someone asks me how it all started, I give the same answer. It started with a painting, a forest at dusk, and a woman who hid the truth in brushstrokes because she knew one day her daughter would see it. Story 2. I watched the movers load tasteful furnishings into my sister Emma's new mansion while standing in the rain. A present from our parents at our wedding, a $2, $8 million home in one of Boston's most affluent neighborhoods. I'm struggling to make ends meet while living in a tiny flat above the bookshop where I used to work. Is it not ideal for them? Unaware of how wet I was from standing outside, my mother gushed. There is enough space for grandkids, and Emma and James will be quite content here. Thinking of the card of congratulations, I forced a smile. It was something I had cobbled together. It's stunning. Mom. Emma came out of the house looking brand new and wearing expensive clothing. What little sunshine came through the clouds caught her new engagement ring. You made it at last, Madison. How do you feel about our little starter house? Home of the starter? as though a mansion worth almost $3 million was merely a stepping stone. It's beautiful. I was able to create the ideal wedding gift. Oh, Maddie, don't feel envious. Using the moniker I'd always detested. Emma laughed. You'll find someone special, I'm sure. One of the nice boys at the bookshop, perhaps. Our mom jumped right in. The Henderson son is still unmarried, you know. He now works as an accountant. Very steady work. I refrained from speaking. I was writing my first novel and had a master's degree in literature at the age of 32. I was just the family's disappointment, though. The daughter who prioritized books over security and business aspirations. I should go. Silently, I said, my shift starts soon, on a Saturday. Mom frowned. But we're having a family dinner to celebrate Emma's house. Some of us have to work weekends. Mom. Emma rolled her eyes. Still so dramatic, Maddie. This is why you struggle, you know. Always choosing the hard way instead of accepting help. Help, like the full ride to business school. I turned down like the position at Dad's firm. I'd refused. Like the arranged dates with suitable men. I'd avoided. What they never understood was that their help always came with strings. Golden handcuffs designed to shape me into their version of success. The bookstore's short-staffed, I said, already turning to leave. And I need the hours. Well, Mom sighed. At least take some leftovers home. I hate thinking of you eating alone in that tiny apartment. I didn't tell her that my tiny apartment was my sanctuary, a space filled with books, art, and peace, a place where I could write without judgment, dream without limits. The next morning, I stopped at Pete's corner store for my usual coffee. Pete, a grandfather figure who'd been running the shop for 40 years, greeted me with unusual excitement. Madison, did you check your ticket? I blinked, confused. Then I remembered the lottery ticket I'd bought 2 days ago. A silly impulse purchase with my last $5 when the jackpot had hit record numbers. Not yet. I pulled the crumpled ticket from my wallet. What were the winning numbers? Pete's eyes sparkled. Check the news, sweetheart. I pulled out my phone, finding the lottery website. The numbers appeared on screen: 7, 13, 24, 31, 42, 53. My hands started shaking. I looked at my ticket, then back at the screen. Pete. My voice was barely a whisper. I think I won. He grinned. I know you did, honey. I watched him draw your numbers live last night. All 6 matching numbers. You just won $97 million. The world seemed to tilt sideways. I grabbed the counter for support. Sit down before you fall down. Pete guided me to a chair. Deep breaths. This is big news, but you need to be smart now. Don't tell anyone yet. Get a lawyer first. And for heaven's sake, sign that ticket with trembling fingers. I signed the back of the ticket. Pete locked it in his safe, made me drink some water, and called his daughter a respected financial attorney. Caroline will meet you in an hour. He said she'll help you do this, right? I nodded, still dazed. Pete, my family. He squeezed my shoulder. We'll find out soon enough. But right now, this is your moment. Don't let anyone take it from you. As I waited for Caroline, my phone buzzed. A text from Emma. Family brunch tomorrow to discuss wedding plans. Wear something nice for once and try not to be late like always. I stared at the message, thinking of her mansion, her perfect life, our parents' endless praise for 20 years. I'd been a family afterthought, the daughter they'd written off as impractical, unsuccessful, lost. Now I had 97 million reasons to prove them incorrect. I texted back, sorry, can't make it. I have something more essential to accomplish. For once, I wasn't lying. 3 weeks later, I sat at my new lawyer's office, completing the final documents to claim my prize. Caroline, Pete's daughter, had been essential, helping me set up trusts, investment accounts, and watertight privacy measures. Remember, she said, examining the paperwork, once we submit them, your name becomes public record. Are you ready for that? I thought about the modifications I'd previously made. I discreetly quit from the bookshop, giving my boss a large check to assist hire and train my replacement. I'd acquired a lovely but modest house in a quiet area, using a trust to keep my name off public records. And I'd set the groundwork for my own publishing firm, aiming to help other ignored writers discover their voices. I'm ready, I said strongly. My face appeared in every Boston news outlet the next morning. A $97 million lottery prize is won by a local writer. Overnight, a bookstore employee becomes a multimillionaire. Madison Bennett wins a reward that breaks records. There were so many texts on my phone. All of a sudden, old classmates, distant relatives, and forgotten acquaintances remembered me. However, the text I was anticipating arrived last. Emma was the first GMAT participant. How come you didn't inform us? Give me a call now. Next, Mom. Elizabeth Bennett, Madison. What prevented you from telling your family about this? We're on our way over now. Where do you now reside? Dad, at last. Your mom is going crazy. Give us a call right now. I made myself a cup of tea and shut off my phone, getting comfortable with my new home office. I can view the garden where I want to set up a reading nook via the window. The scene seemed nearly heavenly as the morning sun softly gilded everything. Through the security camera, my doorbell rang. One more recommendation from Caroline. Emma and my dad were standing on my doorstep when I noticed them. Emma was dressed as though she was going to a picture shoot, and my mother was nervously smoothing her expensive dress. I inhaled deeply before opening the door. Madison, my mom lost her temper. We've been somewhat anxious. Why don't you pick up when we call? Furthermore, how did you pay for this home? Not even the lottery funds have been made available yet. And, hi, Mom. Calmly, I cut her off. Do you want to enter? With scarcely disguised astonishment, they filed into my living room and surveyed the elegant furniture and wall-to-wall bookcases. Emma ran a finger over a shelf and murmured, Well, you may finally relocate to a nicer neighborhood now, I guess, perhaps close to my future residence. A charming little colonial is up for sale, just $4 million. I apologize for interrupting, but I appreciate your care, Maddie, sweetheart. My mom spoke in a honey-dripping voice as she leaned forward. You must comprehend our astonishment. May, this is going to change your life. You'll require direction and sound financial counsel. Your father is acquainted with a number of outstanding money managers. I have advisors on my team. It's Madison, not Maddie, I said. Don't be hard, Emma yelled. We're attempting to assist. You've never been excellent with money, God knows. Like when I gave you a $10,000 loan to launch your first company. Quietly, I asked. The one that you never reimbursed. Emma's cheeks turned red. That was not the same. You needed to accept responsibility, and I needed that. I got up and spoke steadily. She did something that none of you ever anticipated. Look here now. At last, my dad said something. His face was flushed. We've always given you both equal support. I genuinely laughed. On the other hand, you purchased a mansion for Emma's wedding. Her business school tuition was covered by you. Her ideal wedding and her first automobile. When I graduated, what did you offer me? A talk on realistic job options. Since we were concerned about you, my mom broke down in tears. Your decisions were really unwise. All we wanted was, you want for me to resemble Emma. I completed the reasonable, ideal daughter. Guess what, though? I got here because of my foolish decisions. I purchased the winning ticket while working at the bookshop you all despise. You may now, at last, live a true life. Emma stated in a way that seemed giving. We can assist you make investments and connect with the appropriate people. No. There was silence in the room. No, what do you mean? My dad insisted. After walking over to my desk, I took out 3 envelopes. This is a $10,000 cashier's check, Emma. Repaying a loan that you have conveniently forgotten. I gave the first envelope to her. This is a $15,000 check, Mom and Dad. The sum of all of your gifts, payments, and contributions to my life throughout the years. I have meticulous records. The envelopes captivated their attention, unable to speak. The third envelope, I said, contains documents proving that I have already set up my investments with one of the leading firms in the nation, established my own publishing company, and established a charitable foundation for literacy programs. I surely don't need your advice today, just as I didn't back then. However, we are family, though, my mom muttered. Indeed, we are. Families should also celebrate differences rather than strive to eradicate them, encourage aspirations rather than crush them, and love without conditions. I approached the door and pulled it open. Please pardon me while I speak with my foundation board on the funding of new libraries in underprivileged areas. My father responded stiffly. You're making a mistake. You require us. Feeling lighter than I have in years, I grinned. You need me, Dad. And isn't that the true reason you're here? Emma got to her feet, a mask of anger covering her face. Do you believe that some lucky numbers have made you superior to us? I always was, Emma. You simply didn't see it. As they departed, with tears in her eyes, my mother turned around. Please, Madison. We made a grave error. Now we can see that. Can't we begin again? For the first time, I noticed how tiny she appeared when I gave her a close look. How they all appeared to be stuck in their limited conceptions of value and success. Perhaps one day. Not today, I said quietly. As I walked back to my office, I put an end to their protests. The manuscript from my novel, which tells the story of a girl who finds her voice in a world that tries to silence her, was sitting on my desk. The next chapter needed to be written. The Bennett Publishing House launch party, which took place 6 months later, was everything I could have imagined. We converted a former warehouse into a mystical area, brimming with art, books, and opportunities. While children from our literacy program proudly displayed their own stories in a dedicated display area, literary agents and journalists, mixed with local authors whose works we had signed. Pete was standing next to me, grinning like a proud dad. "Madison, look at what you've created." And no money was wasted on boasting. He was correct. However, I could have easily purchased a shiny office tower in the heart of the city. Instead, I had decided to renovate this historic building, making it feel like a home for both readers and writers. I had carefully used the millions I had won to fund educational initiatives, help up-and-coming writers, and create something worthwhile. It buzzed on my phone. Emma texted, "I came across your business in the business journal. It must be pleasant to have Taito hand you everything. James was laid off. Right now, we need some family support." I didn't reply and erased the message. They have tried everything in the last few months. Fake kindness, manipulation, guilt, and then direct demands. Apparently, Emma's starter mansion was now too small. It was time to renew Mom and Dad's membership in the country club. James hasn't succeeded. Investments had to be covered. I had disregarded them all. "Bennett, miss." My sleeve was pulled by a young girl. She was holding a notebook and was a student in our literacy program. "Are you going to read my story?" "Naturally, Sophie." I took her to a peaceful nook and sat down at her level. "What is it about?" "A young woman who discovers a magical pen," she said shyly. "Everything she writes comes true, but she has to figure out what's really important to write about." I smiled, thinking how wisdom sometimes comes from the most unexpected places. "Madison." I looked up. My mother stood there looking uncomfortable in the casual atmosphere. She lost some of her polished perfection. The past months had been hard on them. I knew Dad's firm had lost several major clients. Emma's perfect marriage was showing cracks, and their social circle had begun to shrink as the resources dwindled. "Mom, this is a private event. I know, I had to talk to you." She glanced at Sophie alone. I turned to Sophie. "Why don't you show your story to Miss Sarah? She's our children's book editor." After Sophie scampered off, I faced my mother. "Well, your father's company is failing," she said bluntly. "Emma's house is being foreclosed. Everything's coming apart, and you're here playing with children's stories." I stood up, anger blazing, playing. "Look around. Mom, really? Look, see those kids? They're learning to enjoy reading, to believe in their own voices. See those authors? They're receiving chances they never had before. I'm not playing. I'm constructing something real. But your family has never appreciated my decisions." I cut in. "Even today, you're not here because you care about what I've built. You need money, which is why you're here." She winced. "Your family still includes us. Are you?" I escorted her to our success story wall. Images of kids reading and writers signing their first deals. Programs in the community are actually changing things. Family members rejoice in one another's successes. Family members encourage one another's aspirations. "How recently did you inquire about my book, my objectives, my joy?" I'm not precisely sure." I looked over at her. "My identity hasn't changed because of the lottery, Mom. All it did was release me from the need for approval. I would never get it." Her eyes welled with tears. "We were mistaken. Now I see that. But are you unable to pardon us?" "The problem is not forgiveness," I said softly. "You were forgiven months ago. I'm no longer furious because of this. However, forgiving does not include allowing someone to continue to harm you. What are you looking for from us? Nothing. The point is that you are no longer necessary to me. We have nothing to talk about until you desire a relationship with me that isn't about money, status, or your definition of success." I saw a disturbance close to the entryway. Emma had come, accompanied by James and Dad. "Really?" I let out a sigh. "You all showed up to surprise me at the opening of my business." We are in dire straits. Emma's mascara trickled down her cheeks as she sobbed. James lost all of his money on the investing plan. Our home is being seized by the bank, and Daddy's business is failing. Maddie, please, you must assist us. There was silence in the room. Our visitors made an effort to seem as though they weren't paying attention to the drama. Yes, Dad, I truly did look at my family. Deflated and gray without his normal strength. Emma, designer clothing that has been worn a little, in need of a rescue. Mom is caught between necessity and pride. No, I answered firmly. No. Dad's voice broke. Instead, I'll present you all with an alternative proposition. I took out my phone and opened a few pictures. Carter Financial Services is this. They are seeking seasoned consultants with ties to the community. They've decided to interview you for a senior role, Dad. A decent chance, but no assurances. I moved on to the next picture. Emma, your social skills and event organizing expertise are just what the local art center needs in a fundraising coordinator. You'd be ideal. Janes, project managers are being sought after by my friend's construction business. Actual labor, just compensation. You. Are you saying that we should labor for other people? Emma had a terrified expression. Like me, I want you to earn your own path. Create something tangible. Discover your identity sans the ostentatious titles and borrowed funds. What if we say no? Dad asked sternly. After that, you'll come up with something different. However, I will not give you $1 to continue living the way that caused us all to be so miserable. I was surprised when Mom moved forward. The art center. Do they truly believe Emma would be a successful fundraiser? Yes, because when she truly tries, she is good at it. Not only pretending to be the ideal daughter. Emma smeared her pricey mascara as she wiped her eyes. I have no idea how I can be anything else. You do, indeed. I grasped her hand. We touched for the first time in months. You're intelligent, competent, and tenacious. Instead of using those attributes for show, use them for something worthwhile. Dad cleared his throat. The Carter Financial job. What time is the interview? At 10 tomorrow. Keep your Rolex off. Not your ego, but your experience. They nodded, one by one. Not thankful, not joyful, but maybe considerate. Mom glanced back as they walked away. Your business? It's very incredible. Madison, I'm sorry we didn't meet. Yeah, I answered quietly. Perhaps you will see one day. I agree. When they were gone, Pete showed up beside me. Are you all right, child? I gazed about my publishing house, watching as the visions came to life. The tales being recounted. They're changing the lights. Pete, you know what? Yes, I am. With her notebook in hand, Sophie ran back. My narrative was adored by Miss Sarah and Miss Bennett. Perhaps one day it will become an actual book, she remarked. I knelt next to her. Sophie, do you want to know a secret? Anyone who has the courage to share their tale is the first character in any true novel. Similar to you, like we all do. I read in my garden nook later that evening. I'm working on my book. Emma sent me a text and my phone buzzed. Tomorrow I have an interview at the art center. Any suggestions? I typed back with a smile. Be authentic. Your true self. I'd just won millions in the lotto. It had allowed me to demonstrate to myself and my family what true prosperity looked like. Not the cash in my bank account, but the bravery to be who I was destined to be, and there was no way to quantify the value of that. Story 3, you've been let go. I never thought I'd hear my own father say those 2 words, but there he was, sitting behind his mahogany desk, staring at me with a hardness I had never seen in his steel gray eyes. Even with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline, the workspace seemed oppressive. If you just pay attention to the Henderson account, Dad. I was silenced as he raised his hand. Alexandra, this is Mr. Matthews at the office. And the last straw was the Henderson story. We lost a $12 million deal because of your creative strategy. I held on to the chair's arms and tried to remain composed. The conventional method was failing. It would be sufficient if we only tried my plan for another month. He made his finest CEO award and slapped his fist down on the desk. Rumble, this is not a startup playground where you may try out crazy concepts. This is Matthews & Sons, a business that has spent 4 decades relying on custom and tried and true techniques. Given that I was his only daughter and had worked here since I was 16, beginning in the mailroom and progressing to every department, I did suppress a giggle at the irony of Matthews & Sons. In the meantime, David, my younger brother, had landed a vice president job right out of business school. He shuffled some papers on his desk and said, "The board agrees with me. You're not suited for the corporate world." "This level," Alexandra nodded. "Perhaps you would look better in something smaller. Maybe a boutique or a little neighborhood consultancy business." My blood boiled at the disdain in his voice. I gently got up and smoothed down my charcoal gray suit, which I had worn to several meetings where I had secured millions of dollars in new business. It seemed to be a pointless business. "Right now, you're doing something wrong." "Silently," I said. He did not even raise his head. "You were. HR will be in charge of the severance package. By the end of the day, please leave your workplace." I started to go out, but stopped at the door. "Dad?" His face flashed with annoyance as he looked up. "Do you recall this instance?" It seemed like a funeral march as I made my way to my workplace. Workers swiftly turned away from me as I went by since word of my termination was already circulating among the company's employees. My eyes were only greeted by Janet, who has been my assistant for the last 5 years. She followed me into my office and said, "I heard. Alex, it's not right." Everyone is aware that David promised them impractical delivery dates, which is why the Henderson account was closed. I began putting my possessions in a cardboard box. Now it doesn't matter. I'm just the daughter who doesn't understand traditional business, and David is a Matthews son. Janet watched me remove my several trophies and my framed Harvard MBA. "What are you going to do?" I wrapped my mother's picture carefully. Even though she died when I was 12, I could still recall what she said to me before she died. "Sweetheart, don't allow them to dull your brightness. In any case, shine." I was pleasantly surprised by how at ease I felt when I announced, "I'm going to build something. There could never be anything greater than Matthews and Sons." Janet's gaze brightened. "Do you require an executive assistant?" For the first time that day, I truly looked at her and grinned. Janet wasn't only a helper. She managed operations brilliantly. Trapped in an administrative position at Matthews and Sons because of the old boys club mindset. Instead, how about Chief Operations Officer? Her gaze expanded. "Are you serious? Extremely serious." I gave my personal card to her, the one that doesn't have the Matthews and Sons emblem. "In case you're interested, give me a call tomorrow. Don't tell anyone about this talk, Janet." It was a weird elevator journey down to the foyer. One cardboard box containing 15 years of my life. I had devoted my entire life to this business, sacrificed connections, worked on vacations and the weekends, brought in significant accounts that caused our income to treble. And it didn't matter, for I was not a son. I forced my way onto Fifth Avenue via the spinning doors. It buzzed on my phone. David texted, "I'm sorry, sis. Don't worry, however. I'll look after your customers well. Perhaps you're more comfortable in retail." I didn't answer. Rather, I called a cab and provided the driver with my Brooklyn address. 20 minutes later, I ascended the stairs to a small brownstone and knocked on the familiar red door. It was time to see the one person who had always believed in me. An attractive woman in her 70s emerged when it opened. Alexandra, her silver hair was completely silent, even at this late hour. When my grandma saw me and the package in my arms, her eyes furrowed. He didn't. Yes, he did. A pot of tea was already boiling when she led me inside and led me directly to her comfortable kitchen. A few things remained constant. It was as if Grandma Rose knew when she was needed. She laid out her finest china teacups and said, "Tell me everything." So I did. I informed her about the Henderson case, David's unattainable promises, Dad's aloofness, and the board's ruling. She took in every detail as she listened without pausing to look into her vivid blue eyes, which were extremely different from my father's gray ones. She got up and went to her studies once I was done. I heard her shuffle papers and open drawers. She came back with a big package made of manila. She passed the envelope over the table and added, "I've been waiting for this day. Your mom was aware that it would happen. When it happened, she forced me to give it to you." I opened the packet with shaking hands. A folder of papers and another envelope, wax sealed, were inside. As I read to them, my eyes grew wide. "This is your mother's inheritance, Grandma." She was done. "The one about which your father is ignorant. Interests in her family's shipping business, investments in real estate, everything she had constructed before to her marriage to him, in a trust, awaiting your arrival." I gazed at the figures. Millions. It was worth more than enough to begin something fresh, but not as much as Matthews and Sons. "Why didn't you inform me earlier?" Grandmother Rose sipped her tea. since your mother was aware that you must first try it his way, to allow him to see how valuable you are. She clinked her cup firmly and placed it down. Would you say that he failed the test very spectacularly? With plans already in the works, I took another look at the paperwork, Henderson's account. What I suggested was exactly what they were searching for: inventiveness, modernization, a new strategy. Then maybe, Grandmother Rose grinned. Now is the moment to demonstrate Alexandra Matthews' true abilities. I spent the night at my grandmother's place making plans. I had the rudiments of a plan that would transform everything. By the time I departed, my father believed I wasn't suited for the corporate world. All right, I would demonstrate to him my suitability for the job. Matthews and Sons would be unaware of the impending alteration in the game until it was too late. A year later, the main conference room of the Henderson Group's downtown headquarters was alive with excitement. Through the glass walls, Janet, now Mike Lowe, was getting ready for a presentation. Thomas Henderson was pacing, looking at his watch every few minutes. As I could see, Janet looked at her iPad and murmured, "They're here. Representatives from Matthews and Son have just entered the lobby." I smoothed my Armani suit, which was tailored, red as crimson, not at all like the traditional blacks and grays. My dad liked it better. Exactly. It's time to see their largest accounts disappear. Alex. Janet had a mischievous glitter in her eyes. Was this something you planned? The time for the presentation? Just a coincidence. I grinned. The fact that I'm here to take over Henderson's business while my brother and father are fighting to maintain it. That's just smart strategy. Now, the previous year had flown by. I had started Nova Enterprises from scratch using my mother's wealth and Grandma Rose's connections. We focused on the most cutting-edge business solutions for the digital era, which is precisely what Matthews and Sons dreaded. Important talent that had been passed over at Matthews and Sons was brought over thanks in large part to Janet. It appears that I wasn't the only person who was fed up with conventional approaches. The door to the meeting room opened, and Thomas Henderson walked in, followed by his board members, who were much more tired than when I had last seen them. My brother and father arrived. When Dad noticed me, he halted abruptly, his cheeks flushed. In fact, David retreated a step and almost ran into a board member, Alexandra. My dad's voice broke a little. "Mr. Matthews," I said calmly, holding out my hand. How unexpected. I had no idea that Matthews and Sons would be here today. Thomas Henderson glanced between us, his expression betraying his bewilderment. "You are acquainted." My father ignored my outstretched hand and remarked stiffly, "Miss Matthews used to work for us." "Matthews?" Thomas's eyebrow went up. "Any connection?" "Just a former worker." Dad interrupted abruptly. "To be honest," I grinned, "his daughter is me. However, it is in the past. Let's get the presentation started." The hour that followed was a master lecture in all the concepts that my father had written off as crazy. I demonstrated to them our cloud-based products, AI-driven analytics, and our inexperienced digital transformation approach. A year previously, when Matthews and Sons had persisted on using antiquated techniques, the Henderson Group had demanded. Board members nodded gratefully as David's cheeks turned redder. Despite his expressionless face, I could see my father's hands gripping beneath the table. Amazing. "Miss Matthews," said Thomas. Once I was done, "This is just what we have been seeking. However, I must ask, when you worked at Matthews and Sons, why didn't you suggest these fixes?" There was silence in the room. Everyone looked at my dad. "Oh, good," I said quietly. "I did, Mr. Matthews. I believe that was my final presentation before I left the organization." Before Dad could answer, his jaw tensed. Thomas Henderson got to his feet. "Miss Matthews, I believe we've seen everything we need. The Henderson Group needs your idea in order to proceed. I think the contracts have already been drafted by our legal staff." "What?" David spluttered. "You're not serious. Over the 20 years that we have managed your company, you have lagged behind every technical development in the sector." Thomas gave a solid response. "We need a change now." My father noticed me as the documents were being signed. In some way, he appeared older. If he did, a small part of me was sympathetic. But then I recalled that day in his office, when everything I had worked so hard to create was chillily dismissed. The Henderson story was only the start. Nova Enterprises methodically pursued Matthews and Sons' largest clients over the course of the following 6 months. They were not poached by us. We just gave them what they had been pleading for: inventiveness, effectiveness, outcomes. They jumped ship one by one. The day I had been looking forward to finally arrived. Janet stormed into my workspace. Excitation caused her face to flush. "You must see this, Alex." She gave her pill to me. A financial news piece appeared on the screen. As clients leave, Matthews and Sons stock falls precipitously. Fears of bankruptcy loom. The picture below showed my father looking gaunt as he left his workplace. It said in the caption, "Regarding the company's future, CEO Robert Matthews chose not to comment." My phone rang. The number of Grandma rose. When I responded, she continued, "I just saw the news. How do you feel?" I gazed at the skyline of Manhattan from my office window. I could see the Matthews and Sons building from here. It is no longer the imposing emblem of achievement that it once was. Silently, I murmured, "I didn't do this for retribution. You did it because it had to be done, and I know that, my love. Because sometimes creating a better system is the only way to solve a bad one. Aren't they going to lose everything? Unless someone intervenes on their behalf." Her voice had a tone of knowing. Someone who is aware of both tradition and innovation. Janet was back in my doorway before I could reply. Her expression was grave. "Your father is here, Alex. He wants to meet you." I inhaled deeply. "Bring him in." "Alexandra." "Grandma," answered Rose hastily. "Keep in mind what your mother used to say. Don't allow them to make you less bright." I was done, I recall. "No, sweetheart." The other thing she said. "The deepest rifts can occasionally be bridged by the strongest bridges." As Janet escorted my father inside, I hung up and straightened my shoulders. He didn't resemble the intimidating person who had let me leave a year prior. His tie was a little loose, and his suit looked rumpled. "Alexandra," he muttered, "we must speak." I pointed to the chair across from my desk, which was the same one I had been sitting in his office that day. How things had gone the other way. "Yes," I said, "I think we do." Sitting across from me, my father, the powerful Robert Matthews, was smaller than I had ever seen him. Reduced had, seeking assistance from his inept daughter. Neither of us missed the irony. "Tomorrow is the board meeting." His voice was scratchy as he started. "They are voting on whether to pursue an imminent merger or declare bankruptcy." He stopped and swallowed hard. Having already resigned, David Daggett joined Goldman Sachs this morning. He had, of course. When things got tough, David had always been adept at leaving the ship. And I spoke in a neutral tone, which is why you're here. Expert, since you prevailed. He raised his head, looking me in the eye. "What I said you couldn't do, you did. Create something extraordinary, contemporary, accomplished." As I watched 40 years of labor come to an end, his hands shook a little, because I was too obstinate and arrogant to change. I studied him, leaning back in my chair. "Have you ever wondered why I worked my way up from the mailroom at Matthews and Sons for 15 years, when you had the opportunity to promote me to a top position, like you did David?" He gave a head shake. "Since I cherished that company, not for its prestige or name, but for what it might be. Every invention I proposed, every modification I attempted to make, tradition was not to be destroyed. It was done to aid in Matthews and Sons' development. And at every opportunity, I shut you down. Quietly," he confessed. "Indeed, you did." I got up and moved toward the window where I could see the city. You know what hurt Dad the most? Not the dismissal. I wouldn't even pick David over me. It was that you never once asked why I thought we needed to change. Tell me now. I turned back to face him. Because business isn't about maintaining what worked yesterday. It's about building what will work tomorrow. Mom understood that. It's why her family's shipping company survived when all their competitors went under. His head snapped up. Your mother's company. But that was sold after she died. No, Dad, it wasn't. I pulled out the documents Grandma Rose had given me that night, sliding them across the desk. Mom left it in trust for me. She knew someday I'd need it, either to save Matthews and Sons or to build something new. He stared at the papers, realization dawning on his face. All this time she knew she saw in you. I couldn't what you wouldn't. I corrected gently. He nodded, accepting the truth of it. So, this is it then? You'll watch Matthews and Sons dissolve, knowing you were right all along. I pressed the intercom. Janet Green in the proposal, please. Janet entered with a thick folder, placing it on my desk with a knowing smile before leaving us alone again. What's this? My father asked. A merger proposal. Nova Enterprises wants to acquire Matthews and Sons. His eyes widened. You'd buy us out? No. I sat down again, opening the folder. I'm proposing a true merger. Noah's innovation and digital expertise, combined with Matthews and Sons' 40 years of industry relationships and experience, not destroying tradition, but evolving it. You'd save the company after everything you once told me. I wasn't cut out for business, I said, pushing the proposal toward him. But what you never understood is that real business isn't about crushing competitors or maintaining power. It's about building something lasting, something meaningful. He picked up the proposal with shaking hands and the name Matthews Nova. I replied, honoring the past while embracing the future in my role. You'd stay on as chairman emeritus, focusing on client relationships, what you've always done best. I'd be CEO, leading the company's strategic direction. I paused as equals this time, father and daughter finally working together instead of against each other. He was quiet for a long moment, reading through the proposal. Finally, he looked up and I saw something I'd never seen before in his eyes. Respect. Your mother would be so proud of you, he said softly. She'd be proud of us both, if we can make this work. He stood up, straightening his tie, a glimpse of the Robert Matthews of old. The board meets at 9 tomorrow morning. Join me. I'll be there. After he left, I called Grandma Rose. Well, she asked, how did it go? We're merging the companies. Matthews Nova, bringing the best of both worlds together. She chuckled. Your mother always claimed the strongest bridges are made over the deepest divisions. You've created quite a bridge, Alexandra. The next morning, I stood with my father in the Matthews and Sons boardroom, the same place where I'd presented many plans that had been rejected. The board members watched in startled silence as we presented the merger idea jointly. The vote was unanimous. Later that afternoon, I sat in what had formerly been my father's office, now mine. The Best CEO award still hung on the shelf, but below it now rested a framed portrait of my mother. Janet knocked and entered. The press release is ready. Want to have a look? I grinned, thinking of how far we both come. In a minute. First call the Henderson Group. I want to personally tell them about the merger, completed already. She grinned. Thomas Henderson stated, and I quote, "Those ladies from Matthews need to take the lead." I chuckled before turning to face the city. My father was most likely doing the same thing, somewhere in an office, like this one, picturing York not as it was, but as it might be. He sacked me a year ago because I didn't understand business. We were now working together to construct something that none of us could have done on our own. Retaliation isn't always the greatest kind of retaliation. Sometimes it's pointing them in the direction of progress, and occasionally, just occasionally, the family's biggest heritage is the black sheep. I went to my mother's cemetery that night and laid a solitary white rose next to her gravestone. The news of the merger was already in the news. Nova Matthews, a new business age. I muttered about everything, and you were correct, Mom. It buzzed on my phone. Dad texted me. Tomorrow for dinner. Your thoughts on the digital transformation initiative would be much appreciated. I typed back with a smile, anticipating it. The cemetery was covered in lengthy shadows as the sun sank over Manhattan. However, I was no longer under the shadow of anyone. I was illuminating myself. Enough light for everyone to see, and it could have been the biggest achievement of all.